Hi everyone, my name is Leah Mercer. I'm 36 years old. I moved 2,100 miles away and heard nothing from my family for 19 months. And then, in one weekend, my mother left me 47 voicemails because my sister suddenly needed help with the kids. And everyone remembered I existed again. The first voicemail came in at 6:14 on a Friday night. I was standing in the cereal aisle of a grocery store in Flagstaff, Arizona, deciding whether I wanted the expensive granola or the boring one I always bought when I was pretending to be responsible. My phone buzzed once, then again, then again. Mom, Mom, Mom. By the time I got to my car, I had 11 missed calls and 3 voicemails. Her first message started with my name in that breathless, when injured tone she only used when she needed something big enough to pretend it was love. Leah, call me back right now. This is about family. That phrase used to work on me. When I was 22 and my sister Tessa had her first baby. This is about family meant skipping my weekend plans to drive across town and stay overnight because Tessa hadn't slept. When I was 24 and she had her second, it meant taking unpaid days off because daycare was so expensive, and I was so good with the boys. When I was 27, it meant canceling a birthday trip because Tessa's husband had a fishing weekend, and apparently no one else in our bloodline knew how to warm macaroni or break up a toddler fight. I was not their daughter, sister, aunt, or even backup plan. I was labor with emotional packaging. By the time I turned 30, Tessa had 3 kids and a standing assumption that my schedule was temporary and hers was important. She did not ask if I could babysit. She informed me when I needed to be there. Mom called it pitching in. Dad called it helping your sister build her life. No one ever asked what I was building. 19 months before the voicemail weekend, I moved to Arizona, not impulsively, not dramatically. I took a remote operations job with a logistics company, signed a lease, packed my car, and left Ohio with 2 suitcases, a coffee maker, and a promise to myself that if my family wanted access to me after that, it would have to look like actual effort. For the first 3 weeks, Mom texted weather updates and heart emojis. Tessa sent 2 photos of the kids without captions. Dad called once to ask if I knew where the spare basement key was. And then nothing. No birthday call. No Thanksgiving invitation that sounded real. No Christmas package. No, how's the new job? No, are you lonely? Just 19 months of clean, brutal silence. That's what made the voicemails funny, in a dark way. The emergency was not that they missed me. The emergency was that Tessa's childcare had collapsed. By Saturday morning, I had 23 voicemails. Mom crying. Mom angry. Mom pretending not to be either. Your sister is overwhelmed. The boys are too much right now. She really needs you. Then the sentence that made me sit down on the edge of my bed and stare at the wall. You know you've always been better with them than she is. There it was. Not even disguised. Not they miss you. Not we miss you. Just the old family truth in its natural habitat. Tessa had the children. Man and I had the competence, so somehow my life was still available for reassignment. I did not call back. I listened to every voicemail, though, every single one. By Sunday night, there were 47. The last one was not from my mother. It was from Tessa. No hello, no fake softness. Just, if you don't call back by tonight, don't bother acting like you care about this family ever again. I actually laughed when I heard it, because that had always been her favorite trick. Turn neglect into accusation before the other person can describe it first. You didn't give enough. You weren't here enough. You made me do this alone. Never mind that I had been at her house so often during her first 5 years of motherhood that her oldest once called me Mom by accident, and no one in that kitchen looked embarrassed except me. I opened my laptop that night with no plan except to keep my hands busy. At first, I thought I was just going to replay old texts and remind myself why I had left. But once I started looking, something shifted. There was more than memory. There were screenshots, old calendar entries, messages from Tessa saying things like, "You're getting them Friday too because we deserve one night." Photos of grocery lists Mom had sent me with my sister's kids' names written on top. Venmo notes marked for snacks/diapers/thank you. That had never actually been thank yous, just reimbursements for things I was somehow always the one buying. And then I found the notebook. A cheap spiral one I had packed by accident when I moved. Inside were handwritten dates, times, and pickup schedules from the last year I lived in Ohio. And I had kept it because if I didn't write things down, my family rewrote them for me. Looking at it now, page after page, I realized I had documented nearly everything. School pickups, overnights, sick days, doctor visits. Just for 1 hour. Afternoons that became 11-hour Saturdays. I sat there at my kitchen table in Arizona with 47 voicemails from a mother who had ignored me for 19 months and understood something all at once. They did not want me back. They wanted the old arrangement back. And for the first time in my life, I had distance, records, and enough anger to stop being useful. So instead of calling, I pulled an empty shipping box out of the hall closet and set it on the floor beside my chair. Because if my father wanted to talk about family, I had something better than another argument. I had receipts. I started with the screenshots. That was the easiest part. Text threads with Tessa going back years, full of commands dressed up as assumptions. Need you here by 3. You're taking them Saturday because we already made plans. Mom said you'd do it. Don't make this hard. Then the ones from my mother, softer in wording and somehow worse for it. Tessa is exhausted. You know how she gets when she's overwhelmed. You've always been the dependable one. Just help her through this season. That season lasted nearly 8 years. I printed screenshots until my cheap little home printer started warming the room. Then I moved to the spiral notebook. Page after page of my own handwriting. Dates, times, pickups, overnights, feedings, school closures, notes like missed Hannah's birthday dinner because Tessa needed coverage. Called out sick to work but spent whole day with kids. Mom said she'd pay me back for groceries. Never did. Tessa left at 4:10 p.m., came home after midnight. I don't think I understood how bad it had been until I saw it all in one place. When you're trapped inside a family system, exploitation rarely arrives as a dramatic event. It arrives as one more favor, one more emergency, one more weekend, one more phrase like you know how much she needs you. Then years pass, and everybody talks about your availability like it's a personality trait instead of unpaid labor. By midnight, the box on my floor was half full. Screenshots on one side, the notebook in the center. Under that, I added the stack of receipts I found clipped inside an old accordion folder from my Ohio years, pediatric Tylenol, pull-ups, juice boxes. Gas stations near Tessa's subdivision. Pharmacy runs after croup. School fundraiser wrapping paper I bought because Tessa forgot. The tiny humiliations hit hardest. $7 for glitter glue sticks, $12 for soccer snacks, $23 for cupcakes, because my nephew's classroom couldn't be left out. Nobody looks at those receipts and thinks this ruined a person's 20s, but lay enough of them side by side and you start to see the shape of your own disappearance. At 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed again. Dad. I let it ring out. Then he texted, "Call your mother. She's beside herself." I stared at that message for a long time. Beside herself. 19 months without asking if I was alive in Arizona. But now she was beside herself because Tessa's childcare emergency had reached my voicemail. I typed back one sentence. Did anyone ask why I stopped being available in the first place? 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then nothing. I went back to the box. Around 2, I found the note that changed everything. It was folded into the back pocket of the spiral notebook. A torn piece of legal pad paper in my mother's handwriting. Leah takes them easier than daycare. Don't argue with Tessa in front of the kids. Just keep using family. I sat completely still. There are some things you know emotionally long before you can prove them. I had always known my mother framed these requests in family language on purpose. I had always known she understood exactly which phrases worked on me. But seeing it written down in blue ink, blunt and practical, turned a wound into evidence. Not help Leah feel included. Not make sure this is fair. Just keep using family. I put that note into a plastic sheet protector. At 9 the next morning, I drove to the shipping store on Milton Road. I mailed the box to my father, not my mother, because my father was the family wall. My mother cried, Tessa demanded, but my father was the one who made the arrangement sound reasonable. He had spent years sitting at the head of holiday tables talking about sacrifice and togetherness, while my weekends disappeared into soccer pickups and bath time and emergency macaroni. If there was going to be a fracture, it had to hit the wall first. At the counter, the clerk asked if I wanted tracking. Yes, I said. Signature required? I thought about it. Then, yes. When I got back to my apartment, I had 5 missed calls. Not from Mom, not from Tessa. From my oldest nephew Caleb calling from an iPad. That one rattled me more than the 47 voicemails had. I did not answer, but I listened. Hi, Aunt Leah, he said in that careful little voice kids use when adults are nearby telling them what to say. Mom said to ask if you can come for just a little while because Noah keeps crying and Grandma's mad and everybody's being weird. I shut my eyes. Weaponizing a child had always been Tessa's last move. It worked when I was 26. It worked when I was 29. It did not work at 36 from 2,100 miles away. I saved the voicemail. 2 days later, the tracking updated, delivered, signed for by Daniel Mercer. My father had the box. He did not call that day. Neither did my mother. Tessa, however, sent 11 texts in under 10 minutes. What did you mail, Dad? Are you seriously trying to turn him against me? You are unbelievable. Mom is crying. Call me right now. You always kept score. This is sick. You were supposed to love those kids. That last one made me so angry I had to set the phone down and walk to the sink just to breathe. Because that was the lie they had built everything on. That if I loved the children, I had to surrender myself. That if I cared, I had to be endlessly available. That being useful was the same thing as being good. I wrote back once. Loving them and being used are not the same thing. She responded immediately, then stopped. Then started typing again, then stopped. And for the first time since the voicemail weekend began, I realized the box was doing exactly what I intended. It was forcing somebody in that house to read the story in the right order. My father called on Thursday at 9:23 at night. Not angry, not defensive. Tired. That was almost worse. I answered and heard nothing for 3 seconds except his breathing. Then he said, "How much of that box is true?" "All of it." Another pause. "The note from your mother?" "Yes." The line went quiet again. I could picture him at the kitchen table in Ohio with the receipts spread out, my old notebook open, my mother's handwriting sitting in front of him like something alive and ugly. Finally, he said, "I thought you helped because you wanted to." There it was. The sentence underneath the whole arrangement. I looked out my apartment window at the Arizona dark and said, "That's because Mom made sure you thought that." He exhaled through his nose. Not anger. Recognition. Over the next 10 minutes, it came out in pieces. He had known I helped sometimes. He had not known it was nearly every weekend. He had not known I was buying groceries, medicine, fundraiser junk, and birthday supplies. He had not known Tessa left the kids overnight as often as she did. And he definitely had not known my mother had been keeping her own system going in the background, telling Tessa I felt guilty if I was not involved, and telling him I liked being needed. That part hit him hardest, not because my father was innocent. He wasn't. Because men like him can live inside a system for years as long as it sounds orderly. What he had not realized was that my mother had been feeding the order with lies from both sides. He asked me one question I will never forget. "Did you ever actually get to say no?" I laughed once, quietly. Not without being punished for it. He did not defend her. He did not defend Tessa either. He just said, "I should have known." "Yes," I said. And that was the most honest conversation I had ever had with my father. The explosion happened the next morning. I know because my mother called from a number I didn't recognize at 7:10, sobbing so hard she could barely get words out. I almost hung up, but then I heard Tessa screaming in the background and stayed on the line long enough to understand what had happened. Dad had confronted them both at breakfast. He laid out the receipts, read the note aloud, opened the notebook, asked Tessa in front of Mom whether she had ever once paid me back for anything meaningful. Apparently, she tried to say I had always offered. Then he asked why my oldest nephew had an old school form listing me as the emergency pickup contact for 2 full years, while Tessa told everyone I was just helping here and there. My mother tried crying over him. Tessa tried turning it into an attack on her motherhood. Dad did something he had never done before. He left, just got in his truck and drove to his brother's house 2 towns over. That was the split. Not a divorce. Not a movie scene. Just the first morning in my family's history where the man at the center of the structure stopped holding it up. By Sunday, Tessa had lost her free childcare fantasy and her backup audience in the same week. She could not dump the boys on Mom without Dad there to soften the room. She could not keep calling me selfish with the receipts already read out loud in the kitchen. She sent me 23 texts in 4 days. I answered none of them. My mother sent 5 emails. The first was defensive. The second was weepy. The third said she had only been trying to keep peace. The fourth said she never meant for me to feel used. The fifth was the only honest one. It said, "I think I got so used to you saving things that I stopped seeing what it cost you." That one I read twice. I did not answer right away, but I kept it. 2 weeks later, my father called again. He had moved back home, but not back into the same pattern. Tessa had to arrange actual childcare. Mom was, in his words, walking around the house like she'd just discovered everyone had been keeping score. Good. Someone had to. Then he said something that almost knocked the air out of me. "Caleb asked if you were mad at the kids." I closed my eyes. And because of course that was how Tessa had framed it in the house. Not Aunt Leah was used for years and finally said enough. Just, Aunt Leah left. "I'm not mad at them," I said. "I'm mad at the adults." I told him that. That mattered. More than I expected. Over time, the silence rearranged itself. Tessa stopped texting when she realized outrage no longer got a response. My mother started writing to me like someone learning a new language badly but sincerely. My father became careful in a way I had never seen before. Not warm, exactly, but careful. Like a man who finally understood that there had been labor inside the family he never properly counted. And me? I stopped being the invisible extension cord in everyone else's house. I slept through weekends, bought groceries for myself and nobody else. Spent one whole Saturday reading on my balcony while the sun moved across the parking lot, and nobody asked where the extra wipes were, who had pickup, or whether I could just come by for an hour. I love those kids. I still do. That was never the problem. The problem was that my family only respected love when it came packaged as sacrifice. The mailed box did not destroy my family. It just removed the version of me they had been using to hold it together. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. If that had happened to you, would you have called back after those 47 voicemails? Or would you have mailed the box exactly like I did? And once you realized your family only reached for you when they needed labor, would you ever go back to the old arrangement? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to see you in the next one.